Hello everyone, this is Jim Nix from NomadicPursuits.com, and in this video we'll be talking about how you can easily create vintage looks using Aurora HDR 2018. There's a couple of different ways to do it and a couple of different tools, so let's go ahead and get started. The very basic way to do it is to get into the HDR basic panel, and generally speaking I drop the contrast and I warm up the photo just to create a little bit of a faded sort of sepia type look, and then I'll come into color and I'll just drop the saturation and vibrance a little bit, and you end up with something like that. It's slightly off colors, in terms of its saturation levels. It's not completely black and white, but it's not really colorful, and it gives sort of a vintage feel, as though you sort of came across an old photo somewhere. So that's the first option. Now let me reset those, go back to the basic look. The second one is using the color toning, and I like this method quite a bit. Color toning is down here in your menu. Just click on that, and what we're trying to do is basically get to create sort of a sepia, which is kind of like that yellowish sort of look. And so what we're going to do is drag both the highlights and the shadows kind of into the yellow realm. And so let's see here, something like maybe about like this. Maybe about like that. Now that's kind of bright, but we're not finished. So we're going to come back up here and we're going to take the contrast down just like we did in the first example. And then I think what we'll do next is take the saturation and vibrance down a little bit. Again, just sort of creating that washed out sort of sepia type feeling. And then I want to drag the temperature slider to the right to give it a little bit more of that warmth. I think I'll take Smart Tone down here to darken it just a little bit, and maybe highlights a little bit as well. And you could even, if you wanted to, add a little HDR Enhance just to give it a little bit of detail. But there it is. Let me show you the before. Now that's the middle exposure from a bracket set, but you can see we came a really long way in a short time just creating a sort of sepia type vintage look. So let me reset that. And there's one other thing you can do, and that is to use the tone curve in conjunction with some of these other tools. The tone curve here, if you want to remove shadows, which is what I want to do, I want to take the bottom left corner and sort of drag it up. So I'm basically removing shadows or contrast from the photo. And then I go back in here and do some of the similar things I've done before. Take saturation and vibrance down, take the warmth up a little bit, maybe drop the exposure and the highlights, maybe drop Smart Tone a little bit, add a little bit of HDR Enhance. I could even take that a little bit further, and that's about as warm as it's going to get. If you want a little bit more warmth to it, of course, you can come back here to split toning or color toning and get into these yellows for both the highlights and the shadows. And you can see there we have another example of how you can create sort of that washed out sort of vintage look in a photo. Really, every photo is different. There's no exact steps. There's not necessarily a preset that's going to look good on every single photo. It's really going to just come down to experimentation. But if you take advantage of the powerful tools such as color toning, tone curve, the color filter, and then some of the adjustments in the HDR basic panel, you can quickly and easily recreate that sepia and vintage look using Aurora HDR 2018. So that's it for this video. I hope that it helps. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.